Folks, Winnipeg Jets training camp has started, and I think we've gotten one of the clearest windows into what the Jets want out of this future core from the early returns on some of the prospects, some of the personalities, and some of the early, not only team reporting, but also just some of the interactions between some of the players. We'll dive into what's very interesting and what could be fun to watch in the future with this growing young Jets core on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Good evening, Jets fans, and welcome to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. As always, thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. But more than anything, we just really love and appreciate your support. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more and visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Now, like I said at the top of the episode, this has been training camp season. We're kicking off with a lot of the prospects, and you know what? The vibes with this group seem to be pretty good. We have some of our all-star young prospects like Rutger, McGroarty, Colby, Barlow, and a few others signing up and joining this Jets team. This is the first time that a lot of these kids are meeting each other, getting to interact, and it's very interesting to see how the team has kind of marketed everything, right? I think in a lot of scenarios, when you have young cores and a lot of prospects, teams often do, cool little behind the scenes things. You see how players meet the fans. First time a lot of these prospects are interacting with the local Winnipeg populace as they attend the practices. But I think with what the Jets have really been going for, this is probably the most that I've seen Winnipeg really push the idea of a tight-knit group, right? Obviously, locker rooms and stuff, we know that in the past, other teams have talked about how, together players are, how unified they are. But in this case, with this Jets prospect group, I really feel like Winnipeg was pushing the idea of like bonding, bromance, a tight-knit group, best friends. I saw a lot of those words routinely popping up in a lot of their social media postings, in the videos, and in the interviews. And the vibe that I got is that Winnipeg is really focused on this idea of a tight-knit locker room. We've heard a lot of the rumors over the past few years of the Jets having a fairly toxic room, something that I think Winnipeg has kind of worn on the chin for a while now. I think the reputation for Winnipeg's team chemistry and stuff has been very questionable. Now, last year, I'd say, was the first time where we've heard a very different story. It sounded like a lot of the players got along better. Guys were kind of bought in for the most part, at least until the second half of the season. I can't really speak, about that part, but at least for the first half, the Jets seemed to be in a really good mood. And on the exit interviews, a lot of the guys generally seem to indicate the same thing. So, I think that is a reputation the Jets really want to work on. But what really struck me with the early, behind the scenes videos and stuff coming out of camp so far is how much the Jets are emphasizing the idea of all of these players as personalities, as potential future leaders. We're seeing routinely reporters talking about both Barlow and McGroarty as future captains. And I think that's really worth pointing out. When the Jets drafted a number of these prospects over the past couple of years, I think that there was a renewed focus on guys of high character. And I know that sounds a little bit funny, right? But I think with the Jets, they want players who they feel are going to stick around, that they feel they have good personality, good chemistry, and are like magnetic. And I think McGroarty, for me, really ticked off all of those boxes. But he's more than just a personality. McGroarty is very skilled. He's probably our best overall prospect, and I think in a few years he'll be a full-time NHLer, if not sooner. I think his ceiling is very high. I'm very excited about him. And when you hear him talk, there's just a natural enthusiasm, a love of the game. And it just feels like he has the temperament to where pretty much anyone could be friends with him. That's why I thought it was really fun to see both him and Barlow really getting along. Both of these guys are probably going to become pivotal parts of the locker room and really of this team's future leadership over the next several years. And that for me, to see them like talking about becoming best friends now, really getting along and sort of working together, I think is in some ways reassuring. I know that it's a little bit silly to talk about that stuff when these guys are quite literally, maybe 20. In Barlow's case, he's like 17. So obviously, there's a ways yet for a lot of these players to kind of graduate to the next level and make the pro leagues. But already we're seeing very fun early returns, and I think it just, for me at least, puts my mind a little bit at ease as to where the future of the core is headed. I think Winnipeg is very much signaling what it values, and I think in a lot of ways I kind of like what the Jets are trying to do here. Uh, Obviously, this past year was like fueled by vibes. I think Bones was a very vibesy kind of hire. When you heard him talk, it was about repairing relationships, trying to foster a more positive environment. And while it did work for a little bit, I think ultimately some of Winnipeg's habits were just a little bit too dug in to really undo, which is why this new crop of prospects seems to be a really exciting group. And I think in a little bit, I kind of want to talk about how I see this eventually playing out and why this could be really positive for Winnipeg's overall culture and maybe helping to dispel some of the misconceptions people have about both Winnipeg and the Winnipeg Jets. I think that there's some stuff that's been said about the team that's not really true. And also, I think Winnipeg itself has needed to work on the overall culture of the team to foster a more winning atmosphere and environment where accountability is kind of one of the things that, this Jets team really needs to develop. And I think we'll be getting there at some point. But before we dive into all of that and why Winnipeg might become a really happy place over the next few years, I do want to shout out our friends and partners at FanDuel. Take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets, up to $200. That's right, just $20, and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. Sounds like a pretty dang good deal if you ask me. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to hit the first home run. For all of us Orioles fans, which I'm sure is just me listening to this one, I'm hoping for Ryan O'Hearn, but maybe you're a Jays fan. I don't even know who's on the Jays at this point, but I just know that you'll probably want to follow up on all of the Toronto MLB action, and you can do so with FanDuel, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly, and who doesn't love a little bit of instant gratification? There's no better place to bet on MLB and the Toronto Blue Jays than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Hello, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Everydayers, thank you for rejoining us on tonight's episode, talking about some of the early training camp stuff and some positive vibes that I think the Jets are really trying to sell fans on. And I think more than anything, Winnipeg is trying to create a happy environment, which I know sounds a little bit silly, but past couple of years, when you look at the body language of this team and what the locker room has kind of given off, right? What vibe do you say the Jets have generally shown? I would probably suggest that it's been a pretty pissed off workplace. People just didn't really seem to be on the same page. The coaching staff was disconnected. Players kind of had this very dour body language. And even, guys like Blake Wheeler, who used to be really upfront with the media, kind of had spats with certain reporters and blew interviews off. So generally speaking, vibes were kind of bad. I think players were upset, staff were upset, and the general outlook of this team was kind of gloomy. It wasn't until Rick Bowness came along where things seemed like they might finally shift, and it only lasted for half a season. With the current draft picks and what we're seeing out of training camp, I feel like Winnipeg has really gone all in on this idea of restructuring the leadership order and bringing in a lot of guys who can be positive voices and influences. And I think for the Jets, I think that's especially crucial because Winnipeg, as a town for young players, has had this reputation of being a terrible place to live. Not a place that guys like Dubois or Scheifele or some of these other players want to stick around for. And with, Scheifele, I don't know that that's necessarily true. I think he wants to leave for other reasons. But, Dubois certainly was not really in line with the idea of extending long term. And, you do kind of get it to a degree. But I also feel like in a lot of ways, so much of the Jets and what's great about the city tends to get overlooked because of all of these preconceptions that people have. And hearing McGroarty talk and hearing Barlow talk, there's a comfort level there and sort of this affable, amicable nature and sort of an agreeable nature that I feel like is going to set them up to be guys who, if all goes well, they become really big fixtures for Winnipeg for a long time. McGroarty is already earning a lot of praise from the fans. He's connecting with a lot of the kids, a lot of the folks who have come to really see him. And when you just hear him talk, there's just this natural, easygoing, affable, joyful nature to him that I feel like really makes him a perfect candidate for Winnipeg's eventual future captain. I don't know if he'll wear the C himself specifically, but easily could imagine him one day donning at least an A. Barlow, I think, certainly has some of that similar nature, although we've heard less from him so far just because McGroarty, whether intentionally or not, he just seems to steal the spotlight whenever he's talking. You should listen to some of his interviews. He's super fun, and I already am a huge fan of his. It reminds me of the first day that Dylan Sandberg was drafted. There was a real positive energy, kind of a wide-eyed approach, and McGroarty has taken that to another level. It's why partly I'm more bullish on this team's future than I used to be. I know that you're looking at this prospect pool and you might realize that, no, we don't have a Connor McDavid or an Elias Pettersson, some of these like franchise level prospects. But what I think Winnipeg has really started to build is a very good pool of players with the idea that the personalities and the positive vibes and hopefully the quality improvements in hockey will eventually start to attract other talents, whether it's through trade, through signings, all of that stuff. And I feel like Winnipeg at some point is going to become a much happier place to work. When you have a tight-knit group of guys who seemingly want to work hard, who want to push each other, and who, hopefully get along like they seem to be doing so far, I think that just creates a great recipe for improving the culture of this team. For a long time, I think we've been under, this kind of gloomy atmosphere with the Jets. And for once, today's training camp and stuff, and some of the earlier interviews with a lot of these prospects just felt like a breath of fresh air. I'm actually excited about the future of the team. I think a lot of fans honestly should be too. Now, I don't know that that's going to necessarily mean folks are lining up to, subscribe for season tickets and stuff. But listen, if you're at least looking at it from the perspective of what the future of this team could look like, I think you have to like the direction Winnipeg is going. And I think they've made some good choices. They made really high character selections, but they did not sacrifice talent and skill. They made sure that at the end of the day, they're still getting really good players who can also be strong leaders. And I just don't really hate that. I think for connecting to the fan base, a fan base that has always really prided itself on a hardworking team, one that represents the blue-collar grassroots of the city, I think that this future Jets team could finally start to feel that connection again. I know that recently we really haven't had that, and it's been a bit of a tough one. I've personally, as a fan, felt more disconnected from the Jets than usual. The past season, I started to come back into the fold a bit, but I feel like this group of kids that they're bringing up, they've got me. They've sold me on this vision. I'm kind of down with it, and I'd be curious to know if you are. Let me know how you feel about this group of prospects. Drop your thoughts and feelings in the comments below or at my social medias at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. In just a little bit, I kind of want to also talk about what I hope this means for the overall culture of the team and some things that I hope kind of comes out of a stronger commitment to not only leadership, but hopefully a better work environment with accountability. Hello, friends, and welcome back to these closing thoughts on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Folks, thanks for tuning in and listening to us wax a little bit, wax poetic on some of these young prospects and some of the really fun interviews that they've given during training camp. Obviously, it's been a bit of a process getting to this point. The Jets haven't exactly had the best run of a couple of seasons over the last few years, but I'm starting to feel a lot more confident in some of the young talents that the Jets are cultivating. Now, I just really hope that the team does the right thing and helps them graduate to the next level. But at least in personality-wise, in drafting and in the talent assessments and in the personality assessments, the Jets are checking off all of the boxes that I think I'd be looking for. And the reason that I'm really excited about this particular group is I feel like we're going to see a culture change. For too long, I think the Jets have been very complacent with how the core has been and just sort of being okay with middling performance or just making the playoffs. This group of kids feels like they're going to be really hungry. Lambert, I think is one very underrated example. He's super persistent off the puck. I feel like his two-way game continues to develop, and that sort of drive to improve, to kind of silence the critics and really show that he is a versatile, deeper player than I think a lot of people were expecting, is just one very underrated, kind of under the radar approach, right? Then you've got McGroarty and Barlow, who are very clearly very vocal leaders who want to be kind of at the forefront, whether it's necessarily, fielding questions from the media or kind of talking about their burgeoning friendship. It's very interesting to see all of these guys start to really step forward and put their stamp on this team. I feel like this is the first group of prospects where I've kind of, as a collective unit, seen what could form. Like I don't know how to describe it. It feels like you're looking at a flower that's starting to bloom, right? You can see all of the petals kind of arranged, but it's starting to actually unfurl altogether. In the past, we've had some really good individual talents. We've had some players who've kind of, expressed some really strong leadership feelings and stuff. But this group feels different somehow. Like it's very together, very unified. And maybe that's just because that's how the Jets media is really pushing it. But I also feel like it's because the Jets have started to build this group with all of this in mind. The players that they've drafted, the guys that they're bringing in, it seems like there's a very clear focus on that unity, that togetherness, in that tight-knit locker room that's kind of getting away from like the old Minnesota Mafia days, but is trying to build and forge friendships in a more natural way, or at least hopefully natural. Already, McGroarty and Barlow hitting it off, I think is great news for, what is likely your future leadership. You're going to have Morrissey most likely. Morrissey might even wear the captaincy, and those guys might start to fill in and step up over the years. But all I can say is I feel like this might finally help Winnipeg do some of that culture change in the locker room as a lot of the veterans start to get phased out and these younger guys fill in. I have to say that, in terms of my outlook, like I've said, I'm a lot more bullish on this team. They're going to be perfect. I think that there are going to be moments where this team is going to go through troubles. I think that they're going to have some issues, and it'll be interesting to see how the players really respond to adversity. But overall, it's just training camp. It's just preseason. We're not even to the actual preseason games yet. They've just started scrimmages, and there's a long way yet to go. But if this is kind of the early signs of what this team can be in a few years, if we're seeing the early groundwork for that next great core, I'm kind of down with it. I got to be honest. I'm ready to see what this team can do under these kids. I think that there's a brighter future for this team, and I just hope that when it all kind of coalesces together, at some point, there is at least one or two cups sprinkled in there somewhere. These kids seem like they're hungry for it. I know the fan base is. Let's go see a championship team led by some really outstanding characters. Let me know how you feel about the culture shift and if you think this team is moving in the right direction in the comments below or at my social medias at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. But for tonight's show, that is all the time that we have. We will continue our off-season coverage throughout the week and maybe even talk about some upcoming trades if the Jets are keen to do so or if they're going to hold off on that. But like I said, for tonight's show, that's all the time that we have. Thanks so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. We will see you back here tomorrow with more Jets coverage, so have a great night, and as always, go Jets go.